Welcome to HH28, where we unravel the secrets of self-discovery and matchmaking. We are Hugh and Heather,
two master holistic guides dedicated to helping you navigate the worlds of numerology, astrology, and personality in pursuit of meaningful connections.
Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive all about the year of the goat. We're going way beyond the surface today.
Absolutely. We're really going to unpack the goat personality.
Maybe we should start with, actually figuring out what a goat personality is like. One thing that jumped out at me was all this stuff about goats and art. But it's not just like, oh, goats are good at painting or something.
No, it goes deeper than that. It's more like this inherent sensitivity. It's like goats have this unique ability to take their emotions, their perceptions, all that, and turn it into some kind of creative expression.
So it's more about having that artistic soul than actually being like a master sculptor.
Exactly. For some goats, that might mean music is their outlet.
Right.
But then for others, it might be writing or maybe even just the way they approach a problem, how they connect with other people. It can all be very artistic in a way.
Which actually makes sense when you remember how crazy empathetic goats are. They're those friends who just get you, always seem to know the right thing to say.
Their empathy is definitely a core trait. It's almost like they can tap into the emotions of everyone around them, And I think that deep well of empathy, it fuels both their artistic side and the thing you mentioned about being peacemakers.
Oh, that's right. Goats are all about harmony, right? Like always trying to make sure things are balanced, no drama.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Although that desire for harmony, as much as it comes from a good place, it can be a double-edged sword.
Because sometimes you need a little conflict to really clear the air and understand each other better. Like that saying, the truth will set you free, even if it's a little tough to hear at first.
That's such a key point. It's all about balance. I think goats, they really highlight that. They teach us how important kindness is, how crucial empathy and understanding are when you're dealing with people.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, they also remind us that it's okay to stand up for yourself, to have those tough conversations when you need to.
Okay, so we've got this image now. Goats creative, empathetic, and like professional peacekeepers. But let's get to the fun stuff, the relationships. I am dying to know about these pairings, especially the unexpected ones.
Oh, I think you'd be surprised. Get ready for this one. Love between a goat and a horse.
That's one I did not see coming. Those two seem like total opposites at first glance. You've got the horse, all this energy, always on the move, and then the goat who's way more chill, all about peace.
Exactly. And yet that seeming contradiction is usually what makes them click. Remember how we were talking about balance being key? The horse's energy, it's like this exciting force, but the goat's presence, that's what grounds them.
So the horse brings the spice, and the goat keeps things from going completely off the rails.
And it's not just in romantic relationships either. Think about this pairing at work.
Oh, interesting. So this isn't just about who you should date. It's like a whole new way to understand all your relationships, even work stuff. Tell me more about the goat and horse dynamic at work.
Okay, so picture this. You're working on a project, right? The horse, they're probably the ones bouncing ideas off the walls, super enthusiastic, pushing everyone to think bigger.
Makes sense.
But then the goat, with their eye for detail and their knack for bringing calm to chaos, they're the ones who can take those wild ideas and mold them into something amazing.
That's such a good combo. Speaking of good combos, goats and pigs as being great together, right?
Absolutely. While the horse might bring excitement, pigs offer something else that goats crave: security, unwavering loyalty.
Which, let's be real, is something a lot of goats are looking for in a partner.
For sure. Goats really thrive when they feel safe, understood, cared for, all of that. And pigs are so good at creating that kind of nurturing space where a goat can really blossom.
Okay, I'm already seeing how this whole zodiac thing can be useful, even if you don't, plan your entire life around it. It's like a different lens to view your relationships through. But before we go any further down the rabbit hole of amazing goat pairings, we've got to talk about the flip side, right?
Oh, you mean the challenges?
Yeah, because it can't all be smooth sailing, can it? So which challenging pairing should we brace ourselves for first?
Well, the one that tends to trip people up is goat and ox.
Ooh, yeah, I can already see where this is going. We talked about how much goats love keeping the peace, how sometimes they'd rather avoid conflict than rock the boat.
Right.
And oxen, well, they have a bit of a reputation for being
headstrong.
That's the word. And maybe a little set in their ways.
For sure. Oxen, they're all about practicality, a strong work ethic, pure determination. But those great qualities, they can also make an ox seem stubborn or Like they're not willing to budge, especially when you pair them with someone like a goat who just wants everyone to get along.
It's not that the ox is trying to be difficult. It's more like their whole approach to life, to problem solving, is just fundamentally different from a goat's, where the goat might try to find a compromise, smooth things over. The ox might just put their foot down and refuse to budge.
Exactly. And that clash of styles, it can lead to friction, especially when it comes to communication.
Especially since goats are so sensitive, right? They might take the ox's bluntness way more personally, even if it wasn't intended that way.
100%. What the ox might see is just being direct, honest even. The goat might hear as harsh criticism. And this is where that whole thing about goats internalizing their feelings can really backfire.
Because if they're not careful, they end up bottling everything up.
Exactly.
And eventually, it's just a recipe for resentment and misunderstandings.
You got it. And again, this dynamic isn't limited to romantic relationships. It can play out in friendships, families, even at work.
Okay, so for those who are in a goat-ox relationship, or maybe they are the ox in the pairing, what's the secret? How do you make it work?
Honestly, it goes back to communication, which is key in any relationship. But with this pairing in particular, it's about acknowledging those differences in communication styles and adapting,
So, like, the ox might need to think a little more about how they're coming across, choose their words more carefully, soften their tone a bit.
Right. It's about finding that balance between being honest and being sensitive, even when you disagree. And for the goat, it's about finding their voice, feeling comfortable expressing their needs, and setting boundaries, but doing it in a way that feels true to them.
So instead of avoiding conflict entirely, the goat could try saying something like, hey, I get where you're coming from, but I see things a little differently. Can we talk about this?
Exactly. It's all about open communication, where everyone feels heard and respected. And, these communication patterns we're talking about, they actually connect back to some of the goat's core strengths and weaknesses, which we haven't even gotten to yet.
Oh, you're right. We got so caught up in these relationship dynamics that we almost forgot to unpack the goat's internal world.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that make goats so great, and where do they tend to stumble?
Well, we've touched on a few of their strengths already. They're creative, empathetic, incredibly loving, and loyal people. That's what makes them such amazing partners, friends, family members.
And let's not forget about their work ethic. Goats are super dedicated, always willing to go the extra mile, especially if they really connect with what they're doing.
Totally. They're definitely the people you want on your team, no matter what the project is.
But like all of us, goats have their weak points, right? What are some of the challenges they might face?
Well, as we've seen with those tougher pairings, their sensitivity, which is a beautiful thing, can also be a bit of an Achilles heel.
Because if they're not careful, they can end up taking on everyone else's emotional baggage as their own.
Right. And that can make them prone to overthinking, anxiety, and, like we said, avoiding conflict, even when it might be better to speak up.
Which is a shame because, honestly, goats are way stronger than they think they are.
100%. And that actually reminds me of something important that I feel like often gets overlooked when people talk about the year of the goat. Beneath that gentleness lies a surprising resilience.
Oh, I love that. It's so true. Goats have this inner strength that helps them get through tough times, and they do it with grace,
Exactly. They might not be the loudest voices in the room, but their quiet strength and their compassion, it really can change the world around them.
The goat is supposed to embody yin energy, right? This gentle, receptive force, often linked with femininity, intuition, creativity, all of that.
Beautiful observation.
And it makes me think, in a world that often seems to value assertiveness and competition, this more traditionally masculine energy, how can we all benefit from tapping into our own yin side a little more? Regardless of our sign.
That's such a powerful question. And honestly, I think it gets to the heart of what we've been talking about. It's about finding balance within ourselves.
Exactly. It's not about picking one or the other. It's about embracing both yin and yang, the masculine and feminine, being assertive when you need to be, but also knowing when to step back and listen. True strength comes from finding that harmony within ourselves.
Beautifully said. And I think that's the beauty of the Chinese zodiac. It gives us this framework for understanding these universal parts of ourselves,
Absolutely. It's like you said, these zodiac archetypes, they're in all of us, right?
Absolutely. And speaking of archetypes, let's get back to those interesting goat pairings. We were about to talk about the goat and the monkey. And I think this one might surprise some people.
Yeah, that one definitely caught my eye too. On the one hand, you've got the monkey, right? Super playful, energetic, always the life of the party, it seems like.
Right.
And then you've got the goat, much more introspective, always trying to keep things calm and harmonious. Where's the common ground?
That's the thing about these seemingly opposite pairings. They actually highlight that whole idea of balance. Just like the horse's energy can be grounding for the goat, the monkey's zest for life, it can actually draw the goat out of their shell a little.
I see what you mean. It's like the monkey encourages that playful side of the goat to come out.
Exactly.
Maybe helps them loosen up, try new things, be a little more spontaneous.
Precisely. The monkey might be the one who convinces the goat to finally try that new restaurant, or go on that adventure they've been putting off.
And I bet the goat, in their own way, helps the monkey chill out a little when they need to.
Totally. The goat can offer that safe, stable space for the monkey to come back to when things get a little too hectic. So you see, it's this really cool exchange of energy where both signs kind of push each other to grow.
It reminds me of that saying, life begins at the edge of your comfort zone. I can totally see that playing out in this kind of pairing.
It's about embracing those differences and seeing them as opportunities.
We can't just talk about the feel-good pairings, right?
It's not all about finding your perfect zodiac match.
Exactly. So which pairing should we brace ourselves for?
Well, the one that often throws people off is the goat and the dog. Now, you wouldn't think it at first glance.
Yeah, because dogs are supposed to be loyal, protective.
Exactly.
Which honestly sounds like a pretty good match for a goat, at least on paper.
You'd think so, right? And those qualities are definitely a big part of what initially attracts a goat to a dog. That need for security, that emotional stability, dogs can offer that in spades. But
there's always a but, isn't there?
Right. Remember how we talked about goats being sensitive? Well, the dog's honesty, as great as it is, can sometimes be a little too much for a goat to handle.
It's like that saying, honesty without tact is just cruelty, or something like that.
Exactly. What the dog might see as simply telling the truth, the goat might experience as a personal attack.
So again, it comes back to those different communication styles.
100%.
But I feel like with the dog and goat, it goes a little deeper than that. It's not just about softening the delivery. It's about understanding where the other person is coming from.
You hit the nail on the head. Because for the dog, that need to be honest, it usually comes from a really good place. It's about loyalty, about protecting the people they love. So they might not even realize they're being hurtful. They think they're just being real.
Okay, so how do you bridge that gap? How do a goat and a dog make it work when their communication styles are so fundamentally different?
Well, like you said, it starts with understanding. Maybe the dog needs to be a bit more mindful of how they're phrasing things, especially with a goat. Think about how their words might be perceived.
And maybe pick their battles.
Exactly. Not every little thing needs to be a critique. And for the goat, it might be about trying to see the good intentions behind the dog's words, even when it's hard.
And maybe, just like with the ox, having that conversation early on about communication styles. Saying something like, I really value your honesty, I do, but sometimes I need you to say it a little gentler.
Exactly. Create that space where both people feel safe to talk about these things. And all this talk about communication, it actually ties back to those core strengths and weaknesses we were going to discuss about the goat personality.
Oh, you're right. We got so sidetracked by the relationship stuff, which is super interesting, but we've got to dive into the goat's inner world a little bit. So tell me, what are some of the things that make goats so unique, and where do they tend to struggle?
Well, we've already talked about some of their best qualities. They're incredibly creative, deeply empathetic, and they have so much love to give. I mean, that's what makes them such amazing friends, partners, family members.
And they're hard workers.
Oh, yeah.
Don't forget about that. They're dedicated. They get stuff done, especially if they're passionate about the project.
Having a goat on your team is never a bad thing. But we've got to be real, right? Every sign has its downsides, its areas where they might struggle a bit.
So for goats, what are some of those potential pitfalls? What should they watch out for?
Well, like we've seen with some of those tougher relationship pairings, that sensitivity, which could be such a strength, it can also be a real vulnerability for them. They feel things so deeply, and sometimes they take on other people's emotions as if they were their own.
And all that emotional overload can lead to overthinking, anxiety, and like we were saying before, avoiding conflict even when it might be better to address the issue head on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's a shame because honestly, goats are so much stronger than they give themselves credit for. They have this incredible inner strength that often gets overlooked.
Oh, totally. It's like that saying, still waters run deep. They might not always show it, but goats can get through some really tough stuff.
Right. It's not always obvious on the surface.
Yeah.
But they find a way, and they do it with this sense of grace that I really admire.
It's like that quote, the obstacle is the way. But I feel like we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves. We still need to loop back to one more thing about those goats' strengths and weaknesses. We talked about their empathy, their resilience, but there was something else, wasn't there? Something about how goats approach their goals, their dreams.
So you mean that whole thing about idealism versus practicality?
Yeah, that's it. Because goats are such dreamers, right? They have these amazing visions, but sometimes
It's hard for them to reconcile those dreams with the reality of, well, reality.
Exactly. And I can see how that could be a real struggle for a goat. On the one hand, they have this incredible faith in their dreams, this belief that anything is possible. But then they also have this tendency to overthink things, to get bogged down by the details, which can really sabotage their progress.
It's that classic overthinker's dilemma.
Yeah.
They're so busy analyzing every possible outcome, mapping out every potential obstacle, that they sometimes talk themselves out of even taking the first step.
So how does a goat overcome that? How do they learn to balance that idealism with a little more, I don't know, practicality?
Well, it goes back to what we were talking about before, balance. They need to find that sweet spot between dreaming big and taking action. It's about breaking down those goals into smaller, more manageable steps so they don't feel so overwhelming.
It's like building a bridge to your dreams, one stone at a time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, it can also be helpful for goats to surround themselves with people who can ground them a little.
Oh, like those ox and dog friends.
Exactly. Those more practical, down-to-earth influences can be so valuable for a goat. Not to rain on their parade or anything. It's more about helping them stay grounded as they reach for the stars.
It's all about finding those people who complement your strengths and help you navigate your weaknesses, right? Which I've got to say is a perfect note to end on.
I agree.
We've covered so much ground in this deep dive on the year of the goat. It's been a wild ride.
It really has. But that's the beauty of the Chinese zodiac. It gives us this framework for understanding these universal archetypes, these energies that exist within us all.
And whether you're a goat yourself or you have a special goat in your life, I hope this deep dive has given you a new perspective, maybe even some practical tips for navigating those relationships, those challenges, those unique goat quirks we all know and love.
Absolutely.
So to all our listeners out there, thank you so much for joining us on this incredible journey into the heart of the goat. We'd love to hear from you, share your thoughts, your experiences, your own goat wisdom in the comments below.
Can't wait to connect with you there.
And until next time,
Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep embracing all those, fascinating contradictions that make us who we are.